ऑल राइट। अब इस क्लास को इस तरह से डिज़ाइन किया गया है ये सोचते हुए कि आप एब्सोल्यूट बिगनर हैं पाइथन प्रोग्रामिंग में ही नहीं बल्कि किसी भी तरह की जनरल प्रोग्रामिंग में। और सारे कोड सैंपल्स और जिस तरह से इस कोड का प्रोग्रेशन होगा वो यही इंडिकेट करता है कि ये कोर्स इसी तरह से बनाया गया है कि आपको ना सिर्फ पाइथन की बल्कि कंप्यूटर प्रोग्रामिंग इन जनरल की बेसिक नॉलेज समझ में आए। सो दैट्स द मोस्ट common scenario and the most common thing that you must know in this course. Okay, so this is a course for absolute beginners. आप अभी शुरुआत कर रहे हैं कोडिंग। अगर आपको प्रायर नॉलेज है, इफ़ यू हैव अ नॉलेज इन सी प्लस प्लस और जावा और एनी अदर प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज, दैट्स ऑल गुड। लेकिन हमारे इस कोर्स के लिए हम ये मान के चल रहे हैं दैट यू आर एन एब्सोल्यूट बिगनर, you have no prior coding experience, you have never written a word of code in your life. And that's good because an empty cup is always better than a full cup or a half cup. Okay, so let's start our journey. Let's understand why I have selected Python as your first language to learn. So this is the obvious question, that why Python? Why not some other language like Java or C++? And the reason is that जब मैंने शुरू की थी कंप्यूटर प्रोग्रामिंग सीखनी तो मैंने स्कूल डेज के टाइम में ही शुरू किया था. सो इन दोज टाइम वी यूज टू स्टडी C++, and it's not, it's a powerful language, it's a good language. I'm not giving taking that away from C++, but it's not very beginners friendly. And when you will see the C++ code, अभी मैं थोड़ी देर में आपको कंपेयर करके दिखाऊंगा, it's not easily understandable by beginners. On the other hand, Python is quite simple to understand. Python जो है वो English से ज़्यादा मैच करती है as compared to any other programming language. So it's surprisingly more easier to understand for a newcomer who doesn't know anything about programming. और यही एक रीज़न है कि मैंने Python सेलेक्ट किया है आपको इस कोर्स में सिखाने के लिए, कंप्यूटर प्रोग्रामिंग समझाने के लिए. सिंपल होने के बावजूद इट्स क्वाइट मैच्योर, दैट मीन्स इट्स क्वाइट ओल्ड. इट हैज़ बीन अराउंड फॉर 30 years. So it has a lot of people has written a lot of code in Python. So हमारे पास बहुत सारे एग्जांपल्स प्रेजेंट हैं, बहुत सारे रियल वर्ल्ड एप्लीकेशंस प्रेजेंट हैं. और प्रोग्रामिंग में जनरली यही होता है, आप दूसरे कोड्स को लेके उस पे बिल्ड करके स्मॉल बिट्स को असेंबल करके उनको बिल्ड करके आप एक नया प्रोजेक्ट बनाते हो, बिल्ड समथिंग न्यू. एंड इसलिए किसी चीज़ का मेच्योर होना बहुत अच्छा है क्योंकि उसमें उतने ही ज़्यादा बिट्स एंड पीसेस उस लैंग्वेज में प्रेजेंट होंगे which you can use to create your own application. The next thing that you should understand that it is a very powerful language. So Python is used in a variety of fields just because it's quite powerful. Okay, we'll see later that how powerful is it. Some of the application that it powers are some of the application that you use in your daily life. All right, now let's look at some code samples and compare. This is a C++ code. This will be the first C++ code that you will learn in your school if you are learning C++. And this is the first code that I learned in C++. And there, you can see that this is quite ugly and this quite, it is a kind of horror to understand at first, especially for someone who doesn't belong to computer programming. और ये 7 line of code जो यहाँ लिखी हुई हैं, all that only does one thing. It only shows on the screen this message, hello world. So there is no other use of this program to just write these two words on your screen. आपको इतना 7 line of code लिखना पड़ेगा. Now same program in Python, you can condense everything that you have written in those 7 lines into just one single line, this print hello world, and it will do the same thing. Now decide for yourself which you will select as your first language, which you will want to learn. All right. Of course, C++ has its merit, but for a beginner, it's easier to understand Python. That's why we are starting this course using the Python language. Now, once you learn Python, where can you use it? Okay, of course, you can build general softwares using Python. For example, you can create a music player, a video player, web browser, some calculator, things like that. But there are also some specialized field जहाँ Python use होती है, and I will not go into details in explaining each of these specialized field. इसमें से कुछ को आप already जानते हो. Two of these are artificial intelligence and machine learning. और ये कुछ ज़्यादा आजकल यूज़ होने लगी हैं, खासतौर से इन इंटरनेट एप्लीकेशंस. फॉर एग्जांपल गूगल असिस्टेंट्स एंड आईफोन पे एक सीरी ऐप होता है. दीज आर ऑल अ गुड एग्जांपल ऑफ आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस एंड मशीन लर्निंग. ये आपकी वॉइस को समराइज करके समझ के एंड देन दे मेक इन्फॉर्म्ड डिसीजन ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ योर वॉइस ऑन योर कमांड and you train them, especially Amazon Alexa is one of those programs. You train them to do certain tasks that all falls into machine learning and artificial intelligence. और इन दो चीज़ों को करने के परफॉर्म करने का सबसे अच्छा तरीका Python language है. So there is some powerful field where Python is used. Another such field is data science. This has to do with large numbers. For example, uh, a large number of voters are in election and they vote for a particular party. Then at the end of election, you see how one party get how much percentage of vote, one candidate got how many percentage of vote, and you see all those graphs and charts and curves, and all that is done by using Python programming language. You can also do it using other programming language, but it's very easier to do in Python. And people has been doing this for a long time, so there is already a lot of code present that will make your life easier if you are using Python. The next field is biotechnology. This involves climate models, weather models, and the recent coronavirus pandemic. They are creating vaccine, and they doing research on vaccine. A lot of that result and the data from that result goes into a Python program, which analyzes that result and tells us that is it correct or not, or is it useful result or not. Another field is astrological sciences. This has to do with space and aeronautics and how rockets are launched and the programs that are written to communicate with satellites and send data from there, and how airplanes will perform in different wind condition and climate condition. All those simulation is done using Python. Again, there are other languages too, but Python is most widely used and most easier to understand in this scenario. Or सबसे thrilling concept is game development. A lot of you might be interested in that. Game development is uh, also a domain of Python. बहुत सारी लाइब्रेरी हैं Python में जो गेम डेवलपमेंट सपोर्ट करती है, साथ ही एनिमेशन भी. And but in this course, the course that we are learning, we are not going to study any of these 6 topics or topics like that. Because when you learn a language, for example, if you are learning English as a language, you don't start by writing novels and short stories in English. You start with small letters, then you learn the alphabet, then you make words from those alphabet, then you make sentences, then paragraphs, and then you go on further. और ऐसा ही हम किसी भी कंप्यूटर लैंग्वेज के साथ भी करते हैं. यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड द बेसिक. You have to learn how to crawl before you learn how to run. So you have to understand the basic of this language, और उसके बाद ही आप you can create something beautiful, some useful code out of Python. So as we'll progress, as we'll reach the end of this course, the 4th week, you will learn that we'll be creating more and more useful application that looks like real world application. Okay, all right. So जब आप ये नॉलेज ले लोगे तो व्हाट आर द सम ऑफ द एंड रिजल्ट्स. पाइथन के कुछ एंड रिजल्ट्स कैसे दिखते हैं, कुछ रियल वर्ल्ड एग्जांपल्स क्या हैं जहां पाइथन यूज हुआ है या हो रहा है. एंड द फर्स्ट वन इज इंस्टाग्राम. आप सभी को डबल टैप करने की आदत होगी, एंड दैट ऐप and its logic is written in Python language. Another such service is YouTube. You all know YouTube. You must be using YouTube's. You might be streaming this video on YouTube too. The logic of YouTube and the suggestion that it makes to you, and the suggestions that you are shown are all um, written in Python. And then you have Reddit, and Reddit is a social networking site which is quite controversial. Look it up. Then Google Drive, you all know what Google Drive is, storage service. And then you have this OneDrive, and OneDrive is another storage service just like Google Drive, but it's more oriented toward the enterprise office workers and things like that. Somebody said about Python, somebody said something good about Python, and they said Python is a fast enough language for our site and allow us to produce maintainable feature in record times with a minimum of developer. So what they are saying is that Python is saving them money and time because they have to hire less people and invest less time in writing code because they can easily write code. They can write code very fast because Python is so easy. And who is this dude? This is the chief software architect of youtube.com. So some good advice from a very high placed individual in software industry. So you are learning the right language here. Okay. Now, when you are in the process of learning, you will also know that where you can practice, okay, where you can run this Python programs or code or the assignment that I will give you. What are the tools that are required? Do you need to install something on your computer or on your phone? Well, the answer is yes and no. If you are on a computer, you can install a bunch of software. You can install Python compiler and an editor. An editor is a place where you write your code, and compiler is a software that understand that codes and run that code, okay, and do you something useful from that code. And I have written a detailed guide about this with step-by-step instructions and some pictures and screenshot, and I will send you a link. You will also find the link in the description of this video, and that will explain you how to install this on a computer. I will not go into detail about this in this video. Maybe in a later video we'll learn about this. If you are using an Android phone, if you want to code on that, okay, if you're comfortable with typing on a phone, then you can install the PyDroid app that is available on Play Store. It's free, it's completely free, and it's very user friendly, quite useful. So, sorry. Okay. So you can use that on your phone, but we'll use neither of these methods. Instead, we'll use an online compiler. And an online compiler is something where you don't have to install anything. There is a website. You can go to that website, write your code, click the run button, and it will run the code for you. And one of the reasons for choosing this for the first 2 weeks of your course is that first you don't have to install big softwares on your phone or on your computer. If you want to, you can, but I won't prefer that. And secondly, these online services provide you a way to share the code easily with me and for me to share the code with you. If you're writing in a editor on your computer or on your phone, then you have to copy all that code, send me via some medium. Then I have to copy that again and copy in my editor or in my phone and then run it. And then I can see what are the errors that you run into and what's the problem that you are facing, or if your assignment is correct or not, or if you need some improvement or not. So it will make learning a lot more difficult. Using these online tools, there is you can just especially the first link that there is, you can just click on a share button that is provided and you can share the whole code with a single link with me, और मैं आपके कोड को देख सकता हूँ और मैं बता सकता हूँ कि यहाँ error है and how you can fix that, and I can rewrite that code for you and then share the code back with you. So it becomes very easy for us to communicate online when using one of these compilers. As you will progress through the code, आपको बाद में इन दोनों को इंस्टॉल करने की ज़रूरत ही पड़ेगी. अगर आप कंप्यूटर पे है तो फर्स्ट ऑप्शन और फ़ोन पे है तो सेकंड ऑप्शन, बट इन द बिगिनिंग we'll stick with these two. Okay, all right. The link to these two sites is also in the description. Let's now read about a little history of Python. Okay, how Python was made. This is not important as learning the language, but if you're learning a computer language or a new thing, then it's also uh, comfortable to understand its history, where it came from. So we'll learn about a simple some a history of Python. Python was created by this guy Van Rossum. I'll not pronounce the whole name because this is a Dutch guy and I may mispronounce his name. This is the guy, okay? So he's old now, but when he was young, back in 1991, he created this language, and he comes from Netherlands. This is a country in Europe, and Netherlands produces a lot of programmers. Uh, this was one of them, and he created Python in 1991. That was around 30 years ago, and उस समय एक शो आता था on TV, and that was Monty Python, and he based the name of his programming language on his favorite TV show, and he called it Python. At the time in 1991, Python बहुत immature language थी because it was quite new. बहुत सारे उसमें problems थी, बहुत सारी चीज़ें थी जो Python में आप नहीं कर सकते थे. There were only very limited things that you can perform in Python, and it was also very slow. पर जैसे जैसे टाइम बीतता गया, पाइथन में रिवीजन होते गए, उसका अपडेट होता गया. पाइथन 2 लॉन्च हुआ अर्ली 2000 में, एंड इट इम्प्रूव्ड अ लॉट. फिर पाइथन 3 लॉन्च हुआ 2008 में, एंड इट इज़ द करंट वर्जन ऑफ पाइथन जो हम पढ़ेंगे भी इस कोर्स में. एंड इट्स क्वाइट इम्प्रूव्ड लैंग्वेज, क्वाइट पावरफुल. जैसा कि हमने पहले देखा, इट पावर्स अ लॉट ऑफ पावरफुल एप्स एंड सॉफ्टवेयर ऑन द इंटरनेट, और बहुत सारे और भी उसकी फील्ड्स में यूजेस हैं. So this is Python 3, which we'll be studying in our course. Okay, now let's talk about this course, what you will learn in this course. So as we'll progress, we'll learn a lot of things which are related to programming, not just Python, but programming in general. So if you learn some of these things, for example, if you learn about input, output, and processing that input and creating the output and data storage. ये जो first statement है, this is how actually a computer program works. अगर वो Python में लिखा है या Java में लिखा है या C++ में लिखा है, किसी भी language में लिखा हो, this is the basic thing that it does. It takes input, it processes it, and then it stores the result, and it shows the result to you as an output. The next thing that you will learn is telling your computer, or you're instructing your computer to make decision based on some condition. For example, आपने एक पासवर्ड एंटर किया अपने कंप्यूटर में लॉग इन करने के लिए. सो नाउ द ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम प्रोग्राम हैज़ टू मेक सम डिसीजन कि आपका पासवर्ड सही है या गलत है. So if your password is correct, then it will log you in into your desktop, and if it is wrong, then it will show invalid password. Same with your phone, you have that unlock screen where you give the pattern or a pin or your face recognition, and the software behind that has to make a decision कि आपका जो पैटर्न है या पिन है या फेशियल रिकॉग्निशन डेटा है वो करेक्ट है या नहीं. और करेक्ट है तो इट अनलॉक्स योर फोन, एंड इफ इट्स नॉट करेक्ट देन इट शोज एरर or message like that. This is decision making, and it is very important in computer programs. So it's also something that is associated with artificial intelligence. So you learn about making decisions. You learn about modularity. Modularity कहते हैं प्रोग्राम को छोटे छोटे टुकड़ों में बांट देना. For example, Android operating system, it's a big software, okay? So it's not written in Python, it's written in C++ and Java. And it's made up of smaller, different, smaller programs. So it has a program that keep tracks of your battery. It has a program that keep tracks of time. It has a program that keep tracks of your telephone signal, a program that changes your wallpaper. It has a bunch of different programs which are combined together to create a software. तो आप ये सीखोगे कि आपको कैसे छोटे छोटे टुकड़ों में किसी बड़े प्रोजेक्ट को बनाना है ताकि उनको ज्वाइन करके आप एक यूजफुल प्रोडक्ट बना सकें. जब इस तरह का कोई बड़ा प्रोजेक्ट बनता है तो उस पर एक पर्सन वर्क नहीं करता. दे आर लॉट ऑफ पीपल दैट वर्क ऑन द सेम सॉफ्टवेयर. सो दे आर ऑल गिवन ड्यूटीज ऑफ स्मॉलर प्रोग्राम्स, एंड दे क्रिएट दोज प्रोग्राम्स और फंक्शन, एंड इन द एंड दे आर ऑल कंबाइंड टुगेदर टू क्रिएट अ बिग software. So you will learn all about that. You will learn about repetition. A lot of computer calculation is done by repetition. Humans भी repetition से बहुत सारी calculation करते हैं. For example, if I give you to calculate the fourth power of 3, so you will do something like that. In your brain, you will first multiply 3 and 3, and you'll get 9. And then you'll again multiply 3, and you'll get 27. And then you will again multiply 3, and you'll get 81. So you are multiplying by 3 times or 4 times. Okay, 3 into 3, then into 3 into 3. So this repetition, and since it occurs, it happens so fast in your brain that you don't recognize it. But in computer, it also happens very fast in computer. But when writing the code, you have to understand that computer will perform such task by repetition, by doing calculation one by one. It's not just by multiplication, but with a lot of thing. You will see that with a lot of thing, this calculation, this repetition will work. Uh, the next thing, in the end of this course, you will learn about JSON and API. These two things are now the backbone of the internet. And internet, these are the two things that makes the internet connect. So you learn about that. In the last week, in the last 5 or 6 days, we'll make programs that only uses these two things, JSON and API. And I'll give you a small introduction about what they are. So for example, you post a story on your Instagram page, but it can also be linked and shared to your Facebook page. Now, these are two different apps, but the data between them is connected using API and JSON. So API connects to different kind of services which are written in different languages and which are completely different services or software, and they are connected together using API and JSON. Okay, so you will learn about these and will connect some services, online services into our programs, our software, and will make some useful real world software from that. So when you will reach that, things will become very interesting, as you will see. All right. So enough of the introduction. Now let's see how a computer program works. We have seen what Python is, what it is capable of doing, but how things are done in Python. Okay. So first we'll see how things are generally done in a computer. So say you have to add two numbers, 3 and 5, okay? So take a human example. You have to add 3 and 5. What you will do? I give you these two numbers, 3 and 5, add them. So पहले आप ये दोनों number लोगे and then you will store it into your brain, okay? So you don't just calculate it. You see that आपको answer पहले ही पता है, but since it is happening very fast, um, you don't see the underlying process, okay? The underlying process is that first those inputs, those two numbers are stored in your brain. So the first thing that will happen in a computer program is the input. You will give it these two numbers or the data to work with, and it will store those numbers or data that you give it, some number or some file, and using when it is stored in your brain, and the computer stores it in its RAM. So once it is stored, it will start performing calculation on that number. Your brain will also perform calculation in those numbers. You will add those two numbers, 3 and 2. If I give you, you will store it, then you will add them. 3 and 2 is 5. And when you add them, when you process them, when you perform calculation, the result is also then stored in your brain separately. Aside from input, your brain will also store the result. So 5 is also stored in your brain. So when computer perform this calculation, it will also store the output in its RAM. So it has already stored the input, performed the calculation, and then it has also stored the answer. Now this answer you will then output. If I have asked you this question by speaking, you must have heard it. That's your input. And then you process in your brain, and then to output you will either speak or write it on a paper. Computer also outputs by using a mic, a speaker, so it can output using a speaker, but most of the program that we'll be making, the output will be going to happen through a screen. So computer will output that stored result on its screen in the end. Okay, so that's how a computer program work. That's how anything works. Even human brain works like that. Okay, if you go to a ATM machine, which is actually a computer, and you input your pin, the computer will do some store your pin. First, it will store your pin inside the machine, and then it will perform some calculation. It will uh, link with the server and do the processing to see whether your pin is correct or not, if it matches your card or not. And if it does, then it will show you the account balance. First, it will store your account balance in the machine, and then it will show you the account balance or your name or things like that. Okay, now let's make a real program out of this logic, and we'll make a program to add two numbers. And here you will see the Python code in work actually. So let's add two numbers, let's say 7 and 4, and we are taking 7 and 4 क्योंकि इसी के लिए मैंने slide बनाई है. So we'll stick with these two numbers. So जैसा कि मैंने पहले कहा, you have to store these two inputs somewhere in the RAM, somewhere in the memory. और कंप्यूटर के साथ ये strange है that once you store that number somewhere in the memory, you also have to give that memory location a name. Sorry. Okay, इसको ऐसे समझो that suppose you go to a hotel, okay, and you book a room and you stay in that room. तो जब रिसेप्शनिस्ट को किसी बेल बॉय को या वेटर को कहना होगा that send the food to you, he will not tell him your name. He will tell him your room number. He will say that send this breakfast to room number 203 or send this breakfast to room number 42 and things like that, because now the customer is recognized by that room number. And similarly in a computer program, when you give it some data to store, अगर मैंने कंप्यूटर को 7 दे दिया स्टोर करने के लिए, तो कंप्यूटर will save that 7 in a memory location in a hotel room in its RAM, and that hotel room will receive a name. So we'll store 7 in a memory location and we'll call that memory location as A. We'll call that room as A. Okay. And similarly, and you can call it anything. You can even call it B or C or D or number 1 or num2, anything that you like. Okay. So it's up to you what you name that room or memory location. Then you create another memory location, another room in your RAM, and we'll call it B, और उसके अंदर हम ये दूसरा number 4 save कर देंगे. So हमारे input store हो गए, and then we'll add whatever is stored in room A and room B. The room A में 7 saved है और room B में 4 saved है. We'll add both of them. It will become 11. ये हमारी कैलकुलेशन हमने कर ली, और अब कैलकुलेशन के रिजल्ट को भी हमें कहीं स्टोर करना होता है, जैसा कि हमने पहले देखा था. So we'll store it in a third room and we'll call it C. And that's how dumb a computer is. It does not remember anything. You have to save everything on every step. So हमने पहले दोनों input save किए, फिर उसका जो result आया उसको भी RAM में हमने एक छोटी सी memory location बना के, छोटी सी जगह बना के save कर दिया. उस जगह को हमने कहा C, और फिर उस जगह पे जो भी save था वो हमने last में output कर दिया, screen पे show कर दिया. Okay. So let's write this now in code. First of all, to create a memory location called A and store 7 in it, you just have to write A equal to 7. जैसे आप ये line लिखोगे, RAM में एक memory location बन जाएगी called A, और उसमें ये 7 save हो जाएगा. Okay, अपने आप, you don't have to write anything else. That is how easy Python is. And we'll do the same thing in the next line with B. We'll create a new room into the RAM of the computer and we'll save 7 there, and we'll call that room as B. And then we'll add A and B. हम दोनों numbers को add कर देंगे. So when we are saying add A and B, the computer will understand is as add 7 and 4. तो 7 and 4 add हो गए computer में, 11 result आया, और उसको भी हमने एक third memory location में save कर दिया. We are calling it C. And अब हमारा आउटपुट सेव हो गया. अब हम लास्ट स्टेप पे आ गए. वी हैव टू शो द रिजल्ट. और कंप्यूटर में कुछ भी शो करने के लिए इसे बहुत अच्छे से याद रखना, क्योंकि ये चीज़ हम बार बार यूज़ करेंगे अपने कंप्यूटर प्रोग्राम में. कंप्यूटर में कुछ भी शो करने के लिए, डिस्प्ले करने के लिए पाइथन में आउटपुट करने के लिए वी यूज़ द प्रिंट स्टेटमेंट, एंड दिस इज हाउ वी डू इट. सो वी राइट प्रिंट and then in brackets we write the thing that we have to show on the screen. So here we have to show whatever is stored in C on the screen. So we write print C. और C के अंदर जो 11 सेव है वो 11 स्क्रीन पे दिखेगा. C नहीं दिखेगा. It will show 11 on the screen. So this is how computer programs work. So this 4 line of code will do all of this thing in Python. So there is another thing that you should notice, that since this is stored in RAM, and आपने पढ़ा होगा RAM is a random access memory, it is volatile. उसका मतलब ये होता है कि as soon as this program will finish, जैसे हम लास्ट लाइन पे पहुंचेंगे और लास्ट लाइन आउटपुट शो कर देगी स्क्रीन पे, प्रिंट हो जाएगी C की वैल्यू. As soon as the program finishes, everything from the RAM which is related to this program will be erased. So then memory location A will be erased, memory location B will be erased, memory location C will be erased, and they will be freed up for their next program, for next guest, for next values. ओके तो कोई और प्रोग्राम हो सकता है रन होने वाला उसके बाद, तो उसके लिए वो मेमोरी स्पेस फ्री हो जाएगी, बिकॉज कंप्यूटर रिसोर्स जो हैं वो ज़रूरी होते हैं, दूसरे सॉफ्टवेयर्स को भी यूज़ करना है उसी रैम को, तो you cannot have these numbers stored permanently in those RAM. So as soon as your program finishes, ये पूरा होटल आपका जो 3 कमरे आपने ले रखे थे खाली हो जाएंगे, and they will be allotted maybe to somebody else. I hope कि आपको इस क्लास से necessary constructive information मिली होगी, और it might have interested you in computer programming or Python in general. We'll study a lot of this in detail in the next upcoming classes. And अगर इसमें बहुत खास तौर से ये लास्ट का लॉजिक अगर समझ में ना आया हो, if this still seems arbitrary and far-fetched, don't worry, as we'll progress through this course. After the end of the first week, you will see that a lot of things make sense. और ऐसा सबके साथ होता है when you first start learning a language, uh, programming language. You will become disoriented, चीज़ें शुरू में समझ में नहीं आएंगी, but as you will go on, it will become more and more interesting. So thank you.